بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our study of Umdatul Fiqh of Imam Ibn Qudaamah rahimahullah, we stopped last week in issue number 6, I think it's 641, when we're talking about the Salatul Janazah, how to pray the funeral prayer and the rules. So the author, he talks about in summary Salatul Janazah, and so we'll repeat what he mentions and we'll go down from there. So he says, وَالصَّلَاةُ عَلَيْهِ يُكَبِّرُ وَيَقْرَأُ الْفَاتِحَةِ. He says when it comes to the funeral prayer, the first thing you do, of course after making wudu, facing the qibla, etc., you make takbiratul ihram, and then you read Surah Fatiha. Alright, so the first takbir and Surah Fatiha. Scholars discuss Surah Fatiha in Salatul Janazah, if it's a pillar or like an obligation or it's just a recommendation. The most correct view, you have to do it. It's a must. And later the Shaykh will talk about what is wajib, so it is something you have to do. Even though it's called sunnah in the hadith of Abi Umam ibn Sahal, he mentions the sunnah fi salat, as-sunnatu fi salati ala janaz. The sunnah when doing the salat janazah, and he mentions then to say Surah Fatiha. But the correct opinion is that the word sunnah used here doesn't mean it's sunnah, it means wajib. Because we have the hadith of Ubadah bin Samit, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. La salata, there's no prayer for the one who doesn't read Fatiha. And that's a general hadith, it covers all the different salawat. So first takbir, Surah Fatiha. Issue 642, ثُمَّ يُكَبِّرُ وَيُصَلِّ عَلَى النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Next, he made the second takbir and he sends salah al Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad until the end. Just like you do in the regular salah. Here the scholars, they discuss when you're doing this, is this salah something which you have to do or not do? We'll get to that later. Is it wajib or only sunnah? So imagine somebody, he forgot to do it, or somebody, he did only part of it. So we'll get to it. But the way you're supposed to pray, you send salawat al Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then issue 643, ثُمَّ يُكَبِّرُ. Then he does a third takbir. وَيَقُول. Now he reads the dua for the deceased. And this is the intent behind Salatul Janazah, is that we're doing dua lil-mayyit. Dua lil-mayyit, for the mayyit, for the deceased. As a shafa'ah, Allah accept our intercession for him or her. So obviously, learning the dua, as the Shaykh mentioned many of them, this is the best thing to do. So try to learn it, at least one of them, because anytime there could be a Salatul Janazah. So you have to be ready. Because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said when the Janazah is there and you're going to pray, فَأَخْلِصُوا لَهُ دُعَى. Make sincere dua for them. So sometimes what happens is when we become, many of us may not know what to do or what to say. So it's best to be prepared. But if you don't know the dua, scholars will say, let's say you don't know the dua, any of these duas, then you can make any general dua for the mayyit. Allahumma ghfir lahu warhamhu, or Allahumma ghfir laha warhamha, for the woman. And then the question comes, what if I don't know Arabic and I don't know any dua? Then the scholars say, you do it in English. If you don't know anything, you do it in English. Because like the regular salawat, it's makruh to do any dua other than Arabic, but not haram. For the one who doesn't have the ability, then he does in his language, any language. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was Sami'ul Qareeb, He's all hearing, all near. So they say that if you don't know Arabic, or you don't know dua as reported, do it in any language you know. And this is also one of the fatwa Shaykh Abdul Qaadir, hafidhahullah, and other scholars who say that. Because they say generally, the salawat, you're supposed to do in Arabic, the duas. But we're not going to tell someone who doesn't know Arabic, or for example, a country they don't speak Arabic, and the people are being prayed over, and the people they don't know Arabic, just say Allah forgive them. That's the niyyah. إِذَا صَلَّيْتُمْ عَلَى مَيِّتٍ فَأَخْلِصُوا لَهُ دُعَاء. Make sincere dua for them. So what are the reported du'as? The Shaykh says, وَيَقُولُ. He should say, اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا إنك تعلم منقلبنا ومثوانا. Okay, that part there, well, it could be a different wording, but in the Hadith in Tirmidhi, it doesn't have that part. وأنت على كل شيء قدير اللهم من أحييته منا فأحييه على الإسلام والسنة ومن توفيته منا فتوفه عليهما. So here, this is one dua. So some of the wordings, as you can tell, is not exactly, because the general idea, you should know, the fuqaha, when they report the hadith, they don't always report it as the muhaddithun they do. So it's always muhaddithun, they have the al-fadh of the hadith, because they have the asanid and the matan. The fuqaha usually report the hadith more in what's reported from other books, or sometimes closer to the meaning, or sometimes ziyadat. So you might find some books of fiqh, some wordings, you don't find any hadith. So when you find that, you just check the hadith, you get the one from the hadith, it's more authentic. And that's why, as the Brother Majid is teaching in hadith sciences, you see the hadith scholars, they word a lot about the wording. So again, this wording is a hadith Tirmidhi, this is one, right, without some of the ziyadat. Another one, Allahumma ghfir lahu warhamhu, wa'afihi wa'afu anhu, وأكرم نزله وأوسع مدخله واغسله بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقيه من الخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس وأبدله دارا خيرا من داره وجوارا خيرا من جواره وأدخله الجنة وأعذه من عذاب القبر وأعذه من عذاب النار وأفسح له في قبره ونور له فيه. Again, this one hadith is Bukhari, this hadith Abu Hurairah, I believe, and this wording again a little bit different than the one that's reported, but still it's the general hadith. And these are both authentic hadiths, and they have different wording. Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah, he brings all of them. If you want more, Ahkam al-Janaiz, Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah, he has all of the different du'as that are there. It's sunnah.com, if you go, English and Arabic is there. Hisn al-Mu'min, Hisn al-Muslim, whatever book you want to use, you go, you memorize at least one of them. If you don't know this, then just say, Allah forgive them, have mercy on them. That's enough, inshallah. Or Allah forgive them, or anything that carries the meaning in Arabic or in English or any language you know. So it's important when we're doing the dua for them, we try to be sincere and we're focusing, because this is the point of the salah. Then the Shaykh says, issue 644, ثُمَّ يُكَبِّرُ وَيُسَلِّمُ تَسْلِيمَةً وَاحِدَةً مِنْ عَنْ يَمِينِهِ. Then he makes takbir, the fourth one, and he does taslim to the right, only one taslim. So now, this issue, the scholars, they discuss how many taslim are there in the Salat al-Janazah. Is it 2 or 1? Regular Salat, there's 2. Salat al-Janazah is different. Most of the Sahaba and Salaf, when they reported 1. If you go to many Muslim countries, and even here in our city, you see many Imams only do 1 taslim to the right. But is there a taslim to the left? So some scholars say, that should be reported from Abdullah bin Mas'ud, that he said, this taslim ka taslim is salah. The taslim should be done like the one in salah. So now, what Abdullah bin Mas'ud is mentioning, ka taslim min as-salati, like we do in the salah, is 1 to the left, one to the right, 1 to the left. But now we have an issue, because majority who reported said 1 taslim, 1 taslimah, and the Rasul did that. As Ibn Mas'ud says, it's that salah. So how do you reconcile between both? One view is that both are acceptable. You could do 1 taslim, because in any salah, 1 taslim, you finish the salah. Although scholars, they differ. Is it 1 or 2 to finish the salah? The most correct, if you did 1 taslim, you finish the salah. But you should do 2, because the Prophet used to do generally 2. So one view is, you could do Salat al-Janazah 2 choices. 1 to the right, or 1 to the right and left. Second view, only to the right. Don't do it to the left. And when you look at the evidences, you see that what seems to be stronger is that only to the right was more reported from the Rasul ﷺ, from the Sahaba, marfu'an and mawqufan. Both raised to the Rasul ﷺ and the Sahaba themselves said to the right. However, Shaykh Al-Albani does bring both this narration, he authenticates it. Other scholars authenticate Ibn Mas'ud's version of his narration about taslim to both sides. And so some they differed. What is Ibn Mas'ud saying? Is he saying you do 2 taslim, or is he saying that salah should finish with taslim? Because he says, أنه كان يسلم من الجنازة كالتسليم من الصلاة. So the wording he says, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to finish the janazah like how you finish the salah with taslim. So what's the meaning of this narration? One interpretation is, salah finishes with 2 taslim. That's what he meant. Second interpretation, he meant you finish the janazah with a taslim. Because he said, kat taslim means do taslim. The best at the end, you follow the Imam. Whatever the Imam does, you do, if you're behind him. If he does 1, you do 1. If he does 2, you do 2. But if you're the Imam, the safer one is just to 1 to the right. That's it. If you want to do both, inshallah, there's no harm. But the person has to remember that when it comes to the janazah, if you're behind the imam, your job is to do what? To do mutaba'a. You follow him. إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُتَمَّ بِهِ. You just follow the imam. So sometimes what happens, like let's say you take the view it should be two, imam does one. Just you do one. You follow the imam, no problem. And I find many times the imams they do like this. And again, if you want more, you can look into the issue if you want to see more detail. Issue 645, وَيَرْفَعُ يَدَيْهِ مَعَ كُلِّ تَكْبِيرَةٍ. And then he says you raise your hand with every takbir. And this is again is the scholar's opinion. Here he's mentioned Qudaamah, his view is based on the narration of Abdullah ibn Umar, who used to do that. And where did Ibn Umar get that from? Scholars they say that Ibn Umar only took the Sunnah of Rasulullah. He never did something by himself. So if he did every takbir he did Rafi' al-Yadayn, raise the hands, that means the Sunnah. Just like Salatul Eid, we said the same thing. You have two choices. If you take the narration of Ibn Umar that he did it, and that means Rasulullah taught him, alayhi salatu salam. Or the second opinion, nothing came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so only opening takbir, you raise your hands, you keep it tight. Like the Hanafis view. Both are acceptable views, but since many scholars believe that Ibn Umar learned this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many people raise their hands, this is what's been reported. Although evidence-wise, there's nothing from the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So both are acceptable, although this is what some of the scholars they take. Now the Shaykh he moves on to what is wajib in the salah janazah, what is necessary. He says, issue 646, وَالْوَاجِبُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Wajib here means what do you have to do in the salah janazah? Number one, takbirat. You have to do 4 takbirat, or you can do even more, because one narration says that Rasulullah did 5. Okay, so whatever is reported, you can do, but generally in most cases is 4. So takbirat is wajib. Issue 647, which is the second one, wal-qira'ah. Qira'ah of what? Al-Fatiha. And we already mentioned the reasons for that. So wajib, number 1, takbirat. You have to do takbirat, 4 of them. Number 2, the qira'ah. You have to read Fatiha. Okay, so think about this like if you want to make sure that your salat janazah is valid, you did it right. 648, was-salatu ala nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here, the scholars, they say, some it's wajib. Second opinion, it's sunnah. Just like we said the khilaf about the salah. Remember in the salah class, we said when you pray normal salah, scholars differ. Is salawat ala Rasulullah wajib or sunnah? Right, this is different. So one group said sunnah, because some hadith showed Nabi Sallallahu said you could skip it. Like he mentioned the fara'id or wajibat, he didn't mention it. But other scholars say it's safer to do it. And I think this is the best way to approach it. When you do salat janazah, don't miss it. But if you missed it, then if you said it was sunnah, this is closer to the truth, but we're not going to tell people to miss it. Because salat janazah is only 4 takbirat, you're doing something each time. Okay, and then 649, issue 649, وَأَدْنَى دُعَاءٍ لِلْمَيِّتِ. And the lowest level possible for dua for the mayyit, whatever you can give. So the lowest level is any dua to ask for their forgiveness and their mercy and their pardon. You do it in Arabic, read it in Arabic and English, that's it. And scholars, they mention here that the intent, the maqsood of Salat al-Janazah, the intent behind Salat al-Janazah is to make dua for the mayyit so we can make shafa'ah for them. So you have to make a dua, and scholars say it's wajib. There's no khilaf on that you have to make a dua for them, whatever dua you can. So when you do the dua Salat al-Janazah, obviously that's the intent. And the last one, issue 650, was salamu, at least 1 taslim as we mentioned. So what are the wajib? Number 1, takbir, all 4 takbirat. Number 2, qira'ah, reading Fatiha. Number 3, sending salah Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, some scholars say it's sunnah, but some say it's wajib. Number 4, making dua for the deceased. And number 5, sending salam on to finish the salah. Okay, so when you're praying salah, it's very important. Now the issue of qira'ah, you see some madhabs, they say that qira'ah al-Fatiha is not wajib. You can do dua, thana, just make dua. So some of them they do thana, okay, how you begin the salah. But the correct opinion is, it should be Fatiha. It's the more correct opinion. Okay, now the Shaykh mentions how to pray the salah. He's now going to talk about what happens if you missed it. And before going there, what happens if you're praying? There's a janazah going on, you came late for Dhuhr or Asr, and you finish your salah because you came late and you start the janazah late. How do you catch up or catch what you missed of the salah? Scholars say Salat al-Janazah, when you come to it, it's like any other salah. You start wherever you missed. وَمَا فَاتَكُمْ generally, فَأَتِمُّوا وَمَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ فَصَلُّوا. So if I come late, I just join. But now, is there such thing as sujood al-sahw? We said no. So what are you going to do? Okay, they started Salat al-Janazah. You came in the second rak'ah, second takbirah. So you start like this is your first one. They're in the second, you're in the first. They're in the third, you're in the second, you're in the fourth, you're in the third. When they say Salamu Alaikum, the Imam is finished, what do? One more takbirah, then do salam. Right? You have to do your one, because you can't just say salam with them. Because how many you did? 3 takbirah. We said takbirat wajib. So some people say janazah, they pray 2 takbirah. There's no takbirah, 2 takbirah. You have to do 4. So if you come late, you catch it. What if you come late to the point you missed the whole thing? Then the Shaykh will say, what's the next step? Because it's possible you come, they took the janazah away. So the general rule is you don't pray salat janazah unless the body is in front of you. And we're going to get to the point when there's no body. But the rule is if they move the janazah away, then you have a second scenario, plan B. But the first one is, if you come late, catch whatever you can catch. And salat janazah is not something to miss. Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us how much reward you can get. He said the one who prays the salat janazah gets the reward the size of Mount Uhud. Qiratan actually, 2 huge mountains of reward. The size of the lowest of them is the size of Uhud. So if you're getting this huge qirat of reward, and if you follow the janazah, you get more, another one. You don't want to miss that reward for no reason. So sometimes what happens, people hear about the janazah and then they don't go, that's fine, maybe it's far from you, it's fard kifaya, it's not sin. But if you're in a place where they're praying it, you don't want to miss, never. Because the reward is great. Abdullah bin Umar, when he heard Abu Hurairah narrate this hadith about the qirat, he had a stick, he just broke it on the ground. He said, how many qirat we missed? Well, I never knew that. And Abdullah bin Umar always usually prays, but he heard the reward, he got upset, he missed a lot of them. So for us, in this country, we don't pray janazah a lot. So if you have the option to pray, you should pray it, because of the great reward. Whereas back home, janazah is many. So the scholars, they say, if you miss it, that's how you make it up. And because there's no ruku' and sujood, there's no sujood sahw. So if you mixed up something, or you, for example, somebody did extra takbir or something, no problem. You're ma'adhur, you're forgiven. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Now, the scholars say each is 652. وإن كان, sorry, 651. ومن فاتته الصلاة عليه صلى على القبر إلى شهر. The Shaykh now says, if you miss the salah, like in the masjid or in the place they're praying in, you can pray at the graveyard up to 1 month. Okay, according to this view, up to 1 month after the burial. Okay, so now the issue comes. Someone who missed Salat al-Janazah, he follows him to the graveyard. Can he pray in the graveyard? The answer is yes. And some will say, but isn't it haram to pray beside the graves? Who can answer that question? Well, that's sujood al-ruku' in there. Is it salah? It is a type of salah. It's not the regular salah. And Salat al-Janazah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His divine wisdom, did not put ruku' and sujood in there, the main intent is dua. So it's fine. But going back to the other one, praying to the graves, haram in Islam. If you're praying directly to the graves, there has to be a barrier between you and it. Some places there's a grave next door or to the side or in front of you. If there's a barrier between you and it, salah is fine. But better to have more than one barrier. The more the barriers, the safer. But let's say somebody's praying outside and there's a qabr in front of him. He didn't know. He said he didn't know. It's okay. But if he knows, you cannot pray directly. لا تصلوا على القبور. لا تصلوا إلى القبور. Don't pray towards the qubur. Here, Salat Janazah, no sujood and ruku', so he took that away. He took it away. And the benefit we also take is that if somebody's in that situation, it's better for them to pray even if they couldn't pray in the masjid, because Salat Janazah has a lot of reward. So that's what you're supposed to do. And the scholars, they say that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he did this. But the Shaykh said, إِلَى شَهْرٍ, until 1 month. Why 1 month? They say that this at this stage, after a month, that usually they say that the body no longer is in its regular form. It's going to decompose. So there's no mayyit anymore to pray on. But is that a correct view? It's a view. But the more correct view, even after 1 month, even after years. Because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he prayed, right? And they bring some narration to show that he prayed for one sahabiya after 1 month. The mother of Sa'ad, he prayed for her after a month. But they show another narration The Prophet ﷺ prayed for the people of Uhud after 8 years. After 8 years after burying them. So the Shuhada at Uhud, Nabi ﷺ went to them and prayed for them after 8 years after they're being buried. And this is Hadith Bukhari. So therefore 1 month is not a fix. 1 month is one of the possibilities. And if you couldn't do it, then you could do it after a month. And so sometimes it happens that sometimes you find some bodies, maybe they were killed in a disaster, or they were killed in a building collapsing, like what happened recently in Turkey. And no one prayed for them. Maybe they just discovered the body. Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah mentions a story about that many of us we know that Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah, when he used to live in Syria, that was a long time ago, there was a time period where the French tried to colonize or did colonize over Damascus. And a lot of aerial attacks were going on and stuff like this. So a lot of brothers and people were killed. So he said that time we found some brothers who were not prayed on. So we went and we prayed there after burying them, we prayed for them. We practiced the Sunnah of Rasulullah because no one prayed for them. So that's showing that you can do this. And it also happens in a situation where some people who died, who were reverts to Islam, and nobody prayed for them. It happens sometimes. For example, some who were reverts in their family, but their families refuse Islamic burial. What do? If the family allows, we say we can pray for them, we pray for them. And if they don't, and no one pray for them, someone can go to their grave and pray for them. As long as we know they're Muslim, they die Muslim. So that's their haqq over us. Fard kifaya, remember, somebody has to do it. So that's the benefit we take, that we can do it even if it's a long period of time that passes. Then the Shaykh says, issue 652, وَإِن كَانَ الْمَيِّتُ غَائِبًا عَنِ الْبَلَدِ صَلَّ عَلَيْهِ بِالنِّيَّةِ. He says, now if the person who dies far from the land you're in, then you can pray for them, right? Absentia, which means where they're far away and you're not with them, their body, and you pray with them with the intention. So Salat al-Mayt fil Ghaib or al-Ghaib is a big issue nowadays. Because people, they looked at the issue, whether or not it's always allowed or is there conditions. So how do you pray it? Salat al-Ghaib means somebody passed away in another country. We don't have the Mayit's body. So we can't pray in front of them. So what we make our niyyah for them and we pray janazah normally. That's what it's called. So the question is it sunnah to do this? Yes. Hadith Bukhari Muslim, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed for al-Najashi. Yawm alladhi mata fihi, the day he died. So the Prophet says, stand up, make lines for your brother. And he prayed normally. The question now is it conditioned? Is it conditioned that nobody prayed on them, or is it even if they prayed on them? So some of the scholars, they say that we can do it because the Prophet ﷺ did it. But Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah and others of our contemporary scholars, some of the early scholars, they put the condition that nobody prayed on them. And that's more correct. Because remember Rasulullah ﷺ, when he passed away even, many Sahaba didn't pray for him al-Ghaib. Even him alayhi salam, he passed away. Mu'adh bin Jabal was in Yemen. Other Sahaba were in different places. We have no delay that even those Sahaba who were not with him prayed for him from there. Even though, right, they were in Yemen and the Nabi ﷺ told Mu'adh bin Jabal, you might not see me after this year. And after the Battle of Tabuk, Nabi ﷺ sent Mu'adh to Yemen and he told them, you might not see me after this year. It means this is the last year I'm going to be alive. And Mu'adh started crying. Nabi ﷺ said, don't cry, and he sent him. Nabi ﷺ passed away, but then we don't have Dalil Mu'adh prayed for him. Scholars that show that what is the condition then? Nobody prayed for them because it's Fard Kifaya. So if someone died like Najashi in the Bilad al-Kufr, he was a Muslim amongst all Christians. That's why Rasulullah prayed for them. Not the Prophet prayed for him and people already prayed for him. Some scholars allow this, but the more correct view is that it should be done the way Rasulullah did it. Because, like I said, Sahaba didn't do it for him, and a number of Sahaba who passed away, Nabi didn't pray for all of them. Yes, some of them, if he heard someone died, he would go and pray on them because his salah is special. When he prays for them, he puts light in their qabr. Like the woman who used to clean the masjid, when the Sahaba buried her at night, Rasulullah said, where is the woman? They said, she died, we buried her. He said, why didn't you tell me? He said, because we didn't want to trouble you. He said, show me the grave. And when he prayed for her, and he said, my salah for them is light in their qabr. So scholars say there's different. Rasulullah he prayed sometimes, but he didn't do always. for everyone who passed away. So from there we learn that that's the correct understanding of the action, because it opens a new door now that we pray for some people al-ghaib and some people no. Right? You see now, some people is famous, he gets salah al-ghaib. Somebody is not famous, no. Or sometimes we will say, oh, my uncle passed away, everyone prays for him. Another guy says, have my uncle, then nobody prays for them. This is, this creates actually a fitna actually in the masjid. If it's a Muslim country, inshallah, thousands of people pray for them. So the best is to do it this way and not to open a greater door. Because of the way the Rasul did it, we have to practice his sunnah the way he did, alayhi salam. Although scholars said if someone did pray for them, because remember, some scholars they say, like we said, the correct opinion that if no one prayed for them. But if you take the opinion that somebody wants to pray on someone who's already prayed, then scholars say that if someone did that, the salah would count, it's fine. Because the salah is still valid according to that opinion. Although it's best not to do that. Next issue, 653, the Shaykh says, وَأَنْ تَعَذَّرَ غَسْلُهُ لِعَدَمِ الْمَاءِ أَوْ لِلْخَوْفِ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ التَّقَطُّعِ كَالْمَجْدُورِ وَالْمُحْتَرِقِ أو لكون المرأة بين رجال أو الرجل بين نساء فإنه يتمم. He says here, if now when it comes to washing, if somebody is unable to wash and the janaza, the mayyit, the dead, deceased, due to absence of water or fear that the body will break up into pieces because the person is either being burnt or some kind of sickness, or because the situation where there's a woman who died only amongst men, or men who died amongst only women. In that case, you do tayammum. The Shaykh now is talking about washing the deceased. We said washing the deceased is the right in the Muslim, but what happens when there's an inability? Scholars say then you have two choices. Number one, we wash whatever we can, and however we can. So, for example, if somebody's burnt, or died in a fire. If you put the water, the person's fall apart. So that's going to be a case we can't put any water. Or what happened during COVID-19, we couldn't even touch the body because of the COVID. So what they would do is that they would do tayammum, and sometimes even they couldn't do tayammum, some of them, because we know that you're not allowed to touch. So they put them in that special hazmat kind of thing, that little bag, and then what they do, they just take it and they pray on it and then bury it. Because even some of them, they have the suit to use to the cover, but some they don't. So these situations, scholars say, first step, you try to wash them as we described. If you can't, then you pour water on them however you can. And you take the water, you just pour lightly or all over the body, because that's enough. If you can't do that, then tayammum. But when you go to tayammum, the shaykhs, they say that if you can't wash, do you do tayammum or not? But before getting there, if you can't wash the normal way, just do any washing. Because at the end of the day, that's the haqq of the Muslim, you do the best way you can. And the scholars, they explain that the intent behind the washing the deceased is lil-nadafa, for purification purposes. Nadafa means to purify them of anything, and not liraf al-hadath, to remove ritual impurity. So now, it's very important. Because the scholars, they differed, okay, you can't do water, because the person has a sickness or is burnt or something. What do? You just pour any water on top of them. You can't wash them properly. If you can't do that because the body will break apart, then you go tayammum. But when you go into tayammum, there's two opinions. Opinion number one, you do tayammum, because tayammum is a badal or a substitute for ghusl. It's a substitute for wudu. But the scholars who take that view, they based on the fact that when you're doing washing the deceased, the reason why washing them is to remove any ritual impurity. So, what's the rule in the Sharia? If you can't do wudu, you have to go to tayammum. You can't have the origin, you go to the substitute. So that's the rule. Here, the scholars who take that view, which is many of them, they said because the badal is available, the substitute, so that's the Sharia. And they bring some proof to show that. And the hadiths have some weakness, so they use the general rule. Anytime the Sharia put a substitute for something, you can use it. The second group of scholars who said you don't wash, because now you don't have anything, you just pray. They say that the intent behind it is tanzif, purification. So purification means you're supposed to put the water on them to take away any impurities. Tayammum can't do that. Tayammum is for rafa al-hadath, to take ritual impurity, because you're putting sand in the face and the hands. Right? So that view, you just bury them. That's it, you just bury them because you can't go further. Both are acceptable views. Many scholars, they go on the other side, they do tayammum. And the sheikhs, many sheikhs who say the first view, the second view, which is you don't wash, they say the best thing, khuruj khilaf, do tayammum for them. Which is, the person who's washing, what he'll do, he'll get the dust or the sand, he'll do tayammum, wipe their face, wipe their hands, then do the shouting. And that's the best practice. So in the case, for example, where we cannot do water, we do tayammum. What if you can't do tayammum? Then you just leave it. Because like I said, sometimes it's severe sickness or contagious sickness. Then you have no problem. An example, he also gave a woman who died amongst men. So for example, a woman in some qarya, let's say a village, all men and only one woman died there. No one is a mahram. What are we going to do? In that case, they say you just pour water. But they say if you can't even do that properly because you're going to touch the body, so just do tayammum, I'm going to say. And the same thing for the other way. But again, these are rare situations where there's nobody, they say. So that's what the person who's washing should be aware of that so that they would know what to do. And then we saw in COVID-19 that actually was being practiced. Issue 654, the Shaykh says, إِلَّا أَنَّ لِكُلِّ مِنَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ غَسَلَ صَاحِبِهِ. He said, except in this exception, that every husband, yani spouse, will wash their spouse. The wife will wash her husband, husband will wash her spouse. And we mentioned the proof for this. Right? And this is scholars say it's established that Rasulullah's Sahaba would do this. So for example, Asma bint Umays, Abu Bakr's wife, she washed Abu Bakr. Right? And then they also mentioned Ali washed Fatima. And so these are proofs show. And Aisha said, if I knew what I knew now, I would have washed Rasulullah myself. If I knew what the Sahaba, how they washed him and the details of what they did. And the Shaykh says, issue 655, وَكَذَلِكَ أُمَّلَدْ مَعَ سَيِّدِهَا. An example of Walad, right, in the time when there was slavery and servants and slaves. He's talking about Walad as a woman who gave birth to the son of the child of the master. That doesn't apply to our time, so we'll move to the next one, issue 656. وَالشَّهِيدُ إِذَا مَاتَ فِي مَعْرَكَةٍ لَمْ يُغْسَلْ. If a shaheed dies in a battle, then he's not washed. And this is one of the special qualities of the shaheed. One of the special qualities that he's not washed. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Hadith Bukhari, Hadith Jabir ibn Abdullah, he commanded them not to wash the shuhada Uhud. To leave them bleeding in the blood and not to wash them. But rather just to pray for them. Because Yawm al-Qiyamah, the shaheed is going to come. The blood that's pouring from him is going to pour Yawm al-Qiyamah. لونه لون الدم ريحه ريح مسك. His blood is going to be red, but his scent is going to be perfume of musk. So that's why the honor for the shaheed. But which shaheed is this? This is the shaheed who is shaheed haqiqi, not shaheed hukmi. So shuhada are two types. Shaheed hukmi and shaheed haqiqi. The real shaheed, the one who died in the battlefield, that's the shaheed. And shaheed means this person قد شهد له بالجنة. He's been witness for him and bear witness he's with أهل الجنة because he sacrifices دين الله سبحانه وتعالى. Right? من قتل دون دينه فهو الشهيد. يعني this is just the highest thing you can do. So that one, he has his special qualities. Shaheed hukmi is the one who died in a different form of shahada. Car crash, scholars they mention. Drowning, burning, stomach disease. That's shaheed hukmi. He takes the reward of the shaheed, but doesn't have the ahkam of the shaheed. He doesn't get the ahkam of the shaheed. Because his dying is different. He's not the asl. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he told us other types of shahada, we don't negate that kind of shaheed. But we say that shaheed is a different category of shuhada. So he gets special kinds of rulings. So the person who died in other ways, scholars say, that person, you do the normal things. You don't, not wash them. You wash them and you do all the stuff properly, shroud them, etc. Also, so shaheed, issue 657, وَلَمْ يُصَلِّ عَلَيْهِ. Shaheed, you don't pray on them either. 657, وَلَمْ يُصَلِّ عَلَيْهِ. You don't pray him and also because of his status. So the regular shaheed, the real shaheed, you don't pray, you don't wash, you just bury him as is. The shaheed, the other one who died, the shaheed, the one who takes the ruling, you pray and you wash like normal. And the scholars explain again that these are exemptions the Prophet ﷺ gave, and each of these exceptions they have proof. So that's why we follow what the Rasul did. However, can you pray for Shaheed Hukmi? Well, okay, let's say someone died as Shaheed. Can we pray for them? Scholars say if he prayed, it's fine, but it's not the sunnah to do that. Nabi Sallallahu did he pray for the Shaheed, Shuhada Uhud? Yeah, we just mentioned he did after 8 years, Hadith Bukhari. So they show he did, but he said not to. So some say that he prayed for them, and later told not to, so that was the last one not to do it. But he did it anyways when they first learned about the fact that you pray over the deceased, or he did it for another reason. So you can, but you're not supposed to because he said not to do it. So we take his wordings over his actions. Okay? Because we're not going to say that you can't pray over them. Some scholars say yes, because when you pray for them, you make a dua, but the best is not to. And some Sahaba understood that you're allowed to. So maybe the best way to conclude is to say you're allowed to, but you shouldn't, based on the fact that Rasulullah didn't generally do that. Okay, now the Shaykh says, issue 658, وَيُنَحَّى عَنْهُ الْحَدِيدِ وَالْجُلُودِ. But one thing he should be doing is that he should remove from the shaheed any kind of al-hadid wal-julud, any type of iron or skin or something that may be attached to the body of the deceased, yani the weaponry or the things that might have got attached to his clothing during the battle. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when the Shuhada Uhud died, he took away from them any kinds of skins or any kind of weaponry they had on them, and he removed it. Then they buried them as is. Issue 659, ثم يزمل في ثيابه, and issue 660, وإن كفن بغيرها فلا بأس. So issue 659, then he's buried in his own clothes, the clothes he died in. And the Shaykh says, issue 660, however, if he's buried with other than that, then there is no harm. And if he's shrouded properly. And scholars explain that this is because if someone is shrouded in general, and this is not harmful, because the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he allowed the sister Hamza anhu, to have him wrapped in something, a garment that she brought for him. So some scholars differ. Hadith sahih, some say it's sahih, some say it's da'if. But Hamza's sister brought a special shroud she wanted to shroud him with, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam allowed her to bring it, and they did it for him. Okay, so now the Shaykh said, issue 661, وَالْمُحْرِمُ يُغْسَلُ بِمَاءٍ وَسِدْرٍ. As for the one who is a muhrim, died in a state of ihram, then he is washed with water and sidr, as we mentioned before. And issue 662, وَلَا يُلْبَسُ مَخِيطًا. But he shouldn't be shrouded in any clothing which is makhitan, which is clothing which shows or separates between the limbs. Stitched clothing they translate it as, but it's more like clothing that has a sleeve, one for the leg, one for like this. So rather they say that he should be shrouded with like an izar and rida, right? The upper garment and lower garment, but not like a shirt and pants and stuff like this, because that's what makhit means. Makhit means it has distinct parts for the joints. So sometimes when you see the Umrah and Hajj guides, they say makhit, it doesn't mean stitched. Because someone might say, my clothes are not stitched. No, it just means it has a sleeve, it has a leg. Because some of them, mashallah, they found a way without stitching. No, the point is this, you're not allowed to wear that. That's the point. So for the muhrim, a special ruling, also because of his status, dying in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by going for Hajj. And Hajj, we know, is a type of jihad, a struggle. And the Muslim said for the woman, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislate for them, jihad la qitala fihi, Hajj wa Umrah. So it is a type of, takes a special ruling. And the Shaykh says, also issue 663, وَلَا يُقَرَّبُ طِيبًا. He shouldn't be touched with any kind of perfume. And issue 664, وَلَا يُقَطَّ رَأْسُهُ. So all the rules that apply to the muhrim are applied to the one who died in the state of ihram. So number one, you don't wear clothing that separates between joints and the limbs. Number two, you don't perfume them. Number three, you don't cover their head. And number four, 665, وَلَا يُقْطَعُ شَعَرُهُ. And you don't cut his hair, وَلَا ظُفُرُهُ, nor his nails. So we know when you go in a state of ihram, that's the things that you cannot do. Right? So when you were going for ihram, you can't do these following things. So because you die in state of ihram, also those things are applying. Issue 667 now. It says, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ دَفْنُ الْمَيِّتِ فِي اللَّحْدٍ. It is recommended to bury the deceased with a lahad. Lahad will be like a niche. I think that's the way we did translate it. Which is like when you go into the grave now and you see the grave, when you build a grave, there's the hole you first make. Then you go inside, and then you go in the grave and you make a hole, again, on the side of the wall of the grave. That's called a lahad. It's going in. So he goes in, and then you go inside again, and you put the body inside like a little niche, almost like a little cupboard area. You make a little different hole. You put them in it, turn towards the Qibla, you seal that part, then you get out and you fill the whole thing with sand or dirt. Today, we don't do this because of the place we're living in. So scholars say this, the way to bury, the recommended version is just the Sunnah of Rasulullah. But we know in today's time it's very hard, if not almost impossible, because when you go to the graveyard, you don't have a choice. The hole is already dug because you got the permit, you're submitted, and what you're doing, you just put him inside. So the Sunnah way, you see that back home how they do it. They would make the hole, then they go inside, then they dig the lahad on the side of the wall, on the wall of the grave. And then what they do is they'll put the body in and they face it towards the Qibla. So lahad is the way of Islam and the Muslims, but today we can't do it because of the situation that we're in. And so the scholars say that if you can't do it, then you do the regular one, no problem. Because at the end it's all about burial. Burial is wajib. If you can't do the sunnah way, you do it the recommended. That's what the Shaykh says recommended. He didn't say it's wajib, right? And before going there, when it comes to burying the deceased, it's fard kifaya. That's the ruling, the original ruling. Somebody has to do it, not everyone. And when it comes to burying as well, we said it's for Muslims and non-Muslims. So everybody has to be buried. ثُمَّ أَمَاتُهُ فَأَقْبَرَهُ. When then you die, you're buried. So the scholars explain that when it comes to the burial, obviously it's a big deal in Islam to bury the person properly and give them right burial. And they also talk about hastening the burial and the janazah in general. You hasten it. You shouldn't delay it. But today, obviously, is very difficult because of the situation where people spread out. There comes complications to wait for the deceased family, or so you now wait for the family, these kinds of things. So scholars say in general, if someone should be buried as soon as possible. If it's possible for the family to come fly in a day or two after the deceased died, then this is allowed because we have airplanes now. But besides that, it's better to bury them where they are as fast as possible. Scholars explain, though, if his family has the interest and they recommend that you wait, and the person who's burying them should consider that, because the maslahah for them would be they want to pray on them. Or they might be the direct descendants, so they want to be part of the cleaning and the washing. So it's important that obviously that they're told about this. At the same time, scholars also say it's not correct to delay the burial for no other reason. Right? So sometimes the burial is delayed in our times for other reasons, like the paperwork. Right? To get the paperwork to actually take them out the hospital, and the paperwork to release, and the autopsy, right? Whether or not he needs one or not. These are issues that come. The bottom line is it should be as fast as possible. This is the best. The second issue that's related to this is that what about taking it outside the country? So today we find this doing naql, transporting the body from the Muslim country or the non-Muslim country to the Muslim country. So scholars say that in this case, it generally should not be done. You should bury wherever you die. And if someone or a family requests that, then it can be done if there's a maslahah, like the family wants to make ziyarah of the qabr close to where they live. They all live in one place, and he only lives there. They want to make ziyarah where he lives. He said, you can do naql then. So because no one's going to visit him there. I make dua for him. So it doesn't say this. It's allowed. But otherwise, it shouldn't be something which is considered without looking at the reasons behind it, because it leads to delaying the janazah. The burial. Also, they say you can examine the wasiyah, the bequest of the deceased. What did he say? So, for example, did he say to bury him in where he, like this or like that? So, because then they can say, if he say he wants to bury in the Muslim country for these intents, can it be done easily without delay? And if it's not, then he should bury wherever they are. How about dying in the Muslim country? Scholars say we die in a Muslim country, we should be buried in the Muslim graveyards. Like today we have a Muslim cemetery in Richmond Hill. And if there's no such thing as a separate Muslim graveyard, then a place where the Muslims are buried, not where the place where the kuffar are buried. because the Muslims shouldn't be buried next to the kuffar, and the kuffar not with the Muslims. This was the aad of the Muslims from the past and the present. So you find them separate maqbarah for the Muslims. And scholars say that this is the general ruling. So same thing, if a kafir dies in a Muslim country, buried in the place where the kuffar are buried, or somewhere separate. But it shouldn't be mixing of them, because again, going back to the asl then, the kafir and the Muslim are different deen and rulings. So it's very important that when it comes to this point, that you try your best to find a way to make sure the janazah is done quickly. But today with the administrative process, we have to be aware that there's a process we have to follow. We cannot just ignore these things. And we'll get to some of them in a second. So the Shaykh says, the lahad, this is the recommended method. And the opposite would be a shaq, and you just make a hole. So Nabi Sallallahu said lahad is the way, but we said that it depends on where you are and what the permission you have. The next thing he says, issue 668, وَيُنصَبُ عَلَيْهِ اللَّبِنُ نَصْبًا كَمَا فُعِلَ بِرَسُولِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. That he should be buried inside this lahad, this like niche or little hole. So the hole, and then you have the part inside, the niche inside the grave, and it should be sealed with some kind of labin, which is like a brick. So Shaykh is talking about when you're burying the deceased, is that the way the Rasul was done. So the Shaykh says you put this kind of like brick to seal the hole of the lahad. So for example, so you go inside the hole, then you make a hole inside the hole, and it's on the side. You put the deceased in, face him towards the qibla. That part you're going to seal with some bricks or some kind of thing to close it. Like the Rasul was buried, they closed it with that, some kind of bricks. Now, the Shaykh mentions after this, issue 669, وَلَا يُدْخَلُ الْقَبْرُ آجُرًا وَلَا خَشَبًا وَلَا شَيْءٍ مَسَّتْهُ النَّارِ. So now he says what you shouldn't be doing, and he makes exceptions. He said you shouldn't be going to the grave with plaster or wood or anything that fire has touched. Now this issue, he mentions that the evidence for dislike of this has already proceeded in one of the hadiths. Right? Because the Rasul Sahaba, they learned all about the hadith, how to bury. So we should mention some of this about what you should be doing. So first, you put the body to the grave, then you make the lahad, the place, the hole inside of the wall. Then you put the deceased onto his right side, facing the qibla. Okay, this is what they do. Of course, we'll see when you do the regular one, the shaq, the hole, you can't do that. That easy, because you're going down like this, you're not going this way. Right? So they go into the hole, turn towards the qibla, and then they say then you seal it with this. As for the other things that we mentioned, the wood, the plastic, etc., the Sahaba also narrated, amongst some narration, that you shouldn't be doing this. The Prophet disliked that, or he told us not to do that, he prohibited us. So is the prohibition, or is it dislike? They say it's dislike. And as for the reason for the things which are what's it called? Something not touched by fire, they say that it's supposed to be a good omen. That something which is touched with fire would make, they say that this would be like a good omen to avoid that, so that person would not be touched with the fire in the grave. Because in Islam, we know there's a difference between bad omen and good omen. Okay, what's an omen again? Someone could translate. What's an omen? Someone says a good omen. What do they mean by that? Huh? Fa'al, yes. So what does that mean? Some feeling, something good about something, or feeling bad about something. So if it's a bad omen, we call it superstition, right? If it's a good omen, we mean like have good thoughts about something. So you see something, you hope good. Not good luck, right? And there's a difference between the two. Luck is something different. But it means you see something nice, inshallah, you have good hope in Allah that's a good sign. It's an alama of goodness. So the scholars, they say that that's what was intended. But you put fire, because we know when someone's buried, it's only one of two things. Rawda min riyad al-jannah, or hufr min nar. Hufra min hufr nar. Na'udhu billah, pit and pits of fire. So they don't want anything that has fire touched on it. So that be some kind of bad sign of person. Or if it's avoided, so that person will have no fire in the qabr. Again, this is a ta'lilat, some of the scholars they mentioned. But the idea is that what the Prophet prohibited or disliked And the Sahaba reported as well, don't bring fire near it, don't bring the wood beside it, don't bring plaster, but only what the Prophet was buried with. But again, if there's a need for these things, like for example, someone needs to have something else to seal it, right? Or they can't use brick, they're going to use rock or something, then you go with the circumstances. If they cannot do, better than that. Because again, the situation depends on what you can do. But in terms of following with fire and these kind of things, scholars talk about not to do that. But plaster, we said, and not with something with touch with fire and the wood. With this being said, then the scholars say that the person when he's buried, the Shaykh then mentions, he finished with that. So then you fill up all the sand, or whatever, the dust, or whatever you call it, like soil, and then you move back from that grave, and now you move away, and this is a different situation now. So the burial is a very quick process. And we know the other sunnah involved too. Like we've done going quickly, throwing 3 handfuls of soil onto the head of the grave, etc. Some of we put in Town Da'wah, the article about the steps to bury. Right? Because sometimes your family member dies, they may ask you to be the guide of the whole thing. You say, I don't know what I'm doing. You have to know what you're doing because they look to you. So you can read that, inshallah, step by step what to do, so that we can do the sunnah. Because people do a lot of bid'ah in the grave. You'll find the 2 places, a lot of bid'ah done, weddings and funerals. A lot of bid'ahs you find there. Right? One is time of happiness, one time sadness. So it's not coincidental, right? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say in hadith? Sawtan mal'unan fi dunya wal akhirah. 2 voices are cursed in dunya akhirah. Right? صوت المزمار عند يعني النعمة, the voice of a music in time of happiness, وصوت صوت النياحة عند النقمة, right? The voice of the sound of crying and wailing in time of calamity. It's very important to see that the time people they make those mistakes, the music in time of weddings and wailing in time of death, both of them haram. But also when you go to the graves, there's people doing other bid'ahs, like reading a different surah you're not supposed to read, or somebody will do something that you never seen before, or they maybe would have the different groups of people who would come. So the best thing is that when you try your best to steer the people towards the sunnah. The best way to do is to teach them before they get there, because when people get there, then there's no turning back. They'll do some things. It's not time to be arguing in the graveyard. It's not a good time to, it will advise brothers against that, because sometimes we want to go and correct something. People are wailing, and it's not time to be in there debating if it's allowed or not allowed. What you want to do is you say beforehand, let's avoid this, let's try to do this. طيب, the Shaykh now, he talks about after the burial. But before getting there, we said, in today's time, when it comes to the burial, we said we can't do the lahad. We can't do the niche because of our circumstance in the Western countries where we have to bury with a coffin, a wooden coffin. So what happens is we build the shiqi and the hole, and we just put the grave inside there with the coffin, and then we put the soil on top, and that's it. So in our country here, when you go to a graveyard, you notice that. And the reason why they put this in the coffin is they say because of the soil, the nature of the soil in the ground is very strong in Canada. The body will get decompose faster or something. I don't know. It's some other argument they mentioned. It's not befitting, or they say that it needs to be by law. I don't know. They made a law, so they say that you have to do this. So scholars say asl to bury in a coffin is haram. تشبه بالكفار. It's copying the kuffar. You're not supposed to do that. So the Muslims, you notice when you shout the person, how does the Muslims come to the janazah? Just the body is there. There's no coffin. Today we have a coffin. I know on this side of the world, but in regular Muslim countries, they're carrying the body. And also the body is carried because we shouted the body for a reason, to cover the body, and we pray on them when we carry them. It also helps easy to carry the body, because all you have is small little carrying bed. It's very easy. But now you're carrying coffin. Try running fast with that. The sunnah is to go fast. You're carrying coffin, it makes me dua, you're not going to fall. It's so heavy. Because we know the sunnah we're carrying the janazah. He mentioned, Shaykh, you go fast, you're almost running, like semi-jogging. And you see that in the janazah haram, they're going fast. I mean, not faster than you can get to the door, right, to the baqiyah, but fast enough that if you're slow, they're going to get there for you. So the sunnah was not this. But why is it now? Because they put it as law. So some shuyukh say, if it's a haja, a necessity they put on you, is jais. Because what's needed for, what is allowed to need, or what is there for a need, is permissible, provided there's no imitation. So when we tell us, for example, to bury with coffin, the Muslims, we don't do have elaborate coffins. We just 2x4, that's what it is. From the Home Depot, I'm going to be honest. And I've seen, you can see how they build it. That's it, because we're going to use it for Hajj. We have no choice. We don't put in something special. It's an ibrah, brothers. People, we live in high life. When you die, it's $20 piece of wood from Home Depot. That's what they're going to put you in. Wallah. And you can see it. Sometimes they're preparing in front of you. That's it. That's the hayat. Sometimes you wonder. The kuffar is different. $50,000 or something. I don't know. The guys, they have no idea where they're going. So towards adab, and they're putting them in this thing, which itself has no adab. How much they have to pay. Families, when someone dies, that's why they have all these problems. Muslims, someone dies, it's relatively inexpensive. Although there are some costs, but this for the kuffar, it's another level. So the Muslims, we cannot do that kind of coffin. It has velvet in there and all this stuff. And, the suit and all the stuff they put in there. It's very unnecessary. And so it's israf. So the Muslim, if they say by law you have to, then it's jaiz. And that's why most masajid they do it, then there's no harm in that, because number one, we're not even doing the lahad. We're going to have to do a shiq. We have to have a hole. So from there, we learned that there's no harm in that. Once the body is buried, the next step, the Shaykh says, issue 672, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ تَعْزِيَةُ أَهْلِ الْمَيِّتِ is recommended to give condolences to the deceased family. Before going there, the Shaykh doesn't talk about what do we do when we finish the burial. Scholars say when the burial is finished, we stand there as individuals and we make dua for the mayyit. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Hadith Uthman, he told us, Uthman ibn As, when the person passed away, now your brother is being questioned. He's being questioned, but mumkin nakir. فَأَسَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُ تَثْبِيت. Ask Allah to give him firmness. So you just make dua for the mayyit. Allah gave them firmness. Allah gave them tathbeet, firmness to pass the questioning. So some ulama say a few times, you say 1, 2, 3 times, then you move. So there's no group dua, none of this. This is not correct. This is the mistakes that we find today. People doing group duas. How about a lecture at the grave? Scholars say permissible. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it. Hadith Bara ibn Azib, when he tells the long hadith about what happens when he passed away. That long hadith, they were sitting in the grave waiting for it to be dug. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam just told them everything. So that's permissible to give a lecture. But is it always? Scholars say no. But you have to pay attention to this point, because while you're not supposed to always do it, because now some places if you don't do it, the people don't know what to do. Right? Or they think you have to do it. No, you don't have to. But also, if you don't do it, there might something take its place, another bid'ah or something wrong. So you have to also calculate. If you don't say anything, what are they going to do? Read Quran maybe, or something else they're not supposed to. So you have to weigh in that, and that's what's important, to try to correct the affairs. Because if you don't do that, someone's going to do it, like it or not. And sometimes if they're going to give a talk and you're there, better you give a better talk. Some of sunnah, that someone give a talk and he say some khurafat. Some of them you see them yelling to the grave, say Allah, say Rasulullah. You're thinking, what's going on? It's really bad. As if, like we said before, doing talqeen. He's not going to hear you. So sometimes in those moments you find a mistake happened when we didn't tell anybody who's in charge. Should be somebody who's in charge. People say sunnah, say I'm in the lead, or the Imam in the masjid who's going to lead, because that situation is very tough. So you just make dua, you leave, and then inshallah it's finished with the burial. Now the Shaykh says, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ. So now it's recommended ta'ziyah. Ta'ziyah means to give condolences, and aza'u. You ask Allah to give them sabr for what they lost, to reward them for their patience, and this is for the aqarib mayyit, the relatives of the deceased. Question now comes, and the Shaykh, it doesn't explain it, but what does ta'ziyah mean? So it just means giving them the condolences. Ahsan Allah azaakum, or may Allah give you good condolences, or you tell them fasbiru, and be patient. Inna lillahi ma akhad. Dua, you can make these different du'as for them. But is it a place? Can you make a place to sit down and do it? This is the mushkila now that we have, or the khilaf bayn ahl ilm about majalis ta'ziyah, making a place in the house or in a community center, or even some people doing the masajid. What is the ruling on that? So the Shaykh, he says ta'ziyah, the general meaning is dua for them. Someone passed away, you pick up the phone, you message them. I heard someone passed away, you give them a good word. That's ta'ziyah aslan. But can you say, okay, the Ahlul Bayt are going to make the Qaadir are going to set a place and say, everybody come visit us here? That's the question that we have to have. So scholars, they have two opinions, past and present. Two opinions. One group of scholars, they say it's haram to do that, to make a special place to do it, because this is from an-niyaha, this is from wailing. This is considered from wailing for the deceased. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam prohibited that. The Sahaba understood that to be actually wailing. In one of the narrations, the Sahabi, he mentioned explicitly that we used to consider that time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a niyaha, as a type of wailing. كنا نعد الاجتماع عند أهل الميت وصنعة الطعام لهم من أمر الجاهلية. That's one wording. We used to consider specifying a special place for the deceased family to gather and making food for them. وصنعة الطعام لهم. Making food for who? So the deceased family makes food for everybody who gathered there, as from Amr al-Jahiliyyah, from the affairs of Jahiliyyah. And then the hadith says we consider from wailing. So those group of scholars, past and present, they said that this is not allowed. It's an innovation that people have done, and it's actually something from the affair of Jahiliyyah, should leave it. So how to do ta'aziyah according to that opinion? You see someone in the store, you call them, you give them ta'aziyah like that. You see him in the masjid, salah, say I heard what happened, like that. Second opinion is that it's permissible, but with conditions. And this group of scholars, the way they looked at it, again, there's shuyukh on both sides, madhahib on both sides, past and present. So many of us heard the first view, and this is a safer one. Because the second view, even if it's said aloud, the ulama who said aloud with shurut, the conditions. They never said aloud like we see today. So what is the second view? The second view is you can do it if the family members are going to meet there, the immediate family or friends or people who know that person, and they're just going to come just for the purpose of ta'ziyah, say the good words, give them the strength and dua for them and leave. No food is present, no reading Quran, they're doing the khatam for them, none of that. Just you gather to give them the condolences. And their argument and proof they have the narration of Aisha from Sahih Bukhari. Aisha said that we used to, at the time of Rasulullah, a person from our family passed away, we used to sit with them in our houses, right? Gather with them for 3 days. So they use this proof to show that this is one of the proofs. Aisha mentions, if any one of our family members would pass away, we would gather, the women would gather and we would, from the relatives, and we will have a special gathering for them for 3 days, and we'll have food, specific food, which is the talbina, the specific porridge, and then after the third day we'll stop. As some of the other Sahaba also the same they did. So this view says that you can do it like that. For relatives to gather, or those who are immediate family, or those who know them, just to give them the condolences, and then they are just going to gather for the 3 days. There's no Quran reading, and no food given to others. So the eating food amongst themselves is different. Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one of the reasons he prohibited the ta'ziyah that we have today, the big ones, is because it brings mashaqqa and darar, difficulty and harm to the family. Someone passed away, then they have to cook a lot of food for the people coming. Right? The Sahabas back home, right? They just passed away. Then the person, instead of mourning, they're cooking. And me and you are coming, some people just coming for the food. Is it correct, right? Some people, they look for these things. Na'udhu billah. So this is not, it says correct, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, hadith the death of Ja'far, he said to them, make food for his family. Because Ja'far right now, what they're going through is difficult. So that hadith, these scholars say, and Shaykh bin Baz, others, whoever takes the second view, they say that's proof that you make them food, and therefore that if they're not making the food for you, that the family who's deceased, then it's permissible just for the ta'ziyah. And the other reason why they allowed it, said because in the past, the people were not that many. So you could see them everyday life. You go to the masjid, you see somebody you know. But today the world is big. Maybe someone passed away, no one can give ta'ziyah to you in the way that they used to before. They can never see you. They're not going to meet you. The city is too big. So they said you need somewhere special to know where they could find you. So, but then other scholars will argue that you don't need to because you have the phone. You can just call them like this. So they argue. But those who allowed it, what was the point? They said in order to do the ta'ziyah. That was the intention. Nothing else. They're not talking about the bid'ahs. They're not talking about doing the issue of what's called Khatm al-Quran, which scholars differ over. They're not talking about that. They're talking about how can we reach the family to give them dua and to give them the condolences. So some scholars, they say it's a wasila, and the wasila leads to this. So if we cannot do ta'ziyah except by this, because some of the big cities, the only way people they're going to come and do, or actually give the condolences when they know they're somewhere. They say it's a wasila. Without it, there's no ta'ziyah in today's time, then that's what's allowed. Whereas the other scholars say better to avoid all of it and stick to the sunnah, which is just when you see them. Or today, alhamdulillah, with the cell phones. I think this is a safer view, because many times when you do allow the ta'ziyah, it becomes more than just condolences. It's something additional, things are happening. Last scholars say it should not be in the masjid, not in the masajid. Because that's actually, they say, is bid'ah. Because the masajid are built for Allah, for the salah, not for condolences, for private events like that, like someone passed away. This is masajid, إنما بني المساجد لما بني له مساجد for ibadah. وأن المساجد لله. So they say shouldn't have been masajid, or in the buyut, houses or other places. But to be honest, now that people are getting more and more knowledge, they're avoiding this as they used to before. So I think this is something which, inshallah, we should avoid. The Shaykh there, but since you know it's a difference of opinion though, it gives you also a little bit of more scope as to how to communicate this to your family. Because amongst our family, those who are very stubborn on this. So what can we do if they're not going to listen to us at all? They're going to do it like it or not. We try to guide them to, okay, if you're going to do the sunnah way, like this. I mean, only people are going to come give you ta'ziyah and leave. Don't cook anything for them. Don't make it difficult on yourself. Don't do the khatm al-Quran. Just leave it for dua like this for the people. If you can't get them away from it, right? This is the thing. But if you remember, these issues, usually when it happens, someone dies, then you think about it. So we have to remember, if our family members, we have to teach them these things before someone dies. Right? Because what happens, when someone dies and you're debating with them, the person already his heart is paining, you're telling them this is wrong, you can't do that, because in their head they're thinking, how am I going to respect them? Same when we tell them, you shouldn't read the Quran for them. And when they die, they think it had so how can I help them? So you should tell them instead, before that, what you could do for the deceased, building wells, and it's always good to be ahead of them. Same thing when it comes to the afrah, the weddings or the happy times. I teach them the hudud beforehand, so they will know, okay, we're going to have an event, you know what you cannot do. But it's not good to come to the event and say, what is this haram you guys doing? Because then you're not going to be able to do much, unless, of course, you have a lot of influence. But if you have the ability to not to do it yourself in your household, it's the best to avoid it. And because many people, they don't know that the scholars, the Sahaba were narrated. The last point, the narration of Sahaba that says is from the Amr Jahiliyyah. The second group say that narration is ma'lul. It's deficient, it's defective. It's a weak narration. So remember, the first group has a hadith of Jarir that is considered from Amr Jahiliyyah. They say it's sahih. Second group, they said that hadith is da'if. They use hadith Aisha to show that it's allowed. The other group said that hadith Aisha doesn't say this for the public, it's for the family. And talking about making food, they're not making like this. So the khilaf is there. But I'm just saying the first view, no doubt that view is a safer one because of the points we mentioned. So it's recommended for us, if you do hear some pass away, you give them the condolences when you see them, or you call them, or you send them a message. Today it's easier. A mas'ala that comes up, how about when someone passed away, can we call people to the janazah? We know Rasulullah prohibited for us to announce the death of the people. Right? Announcing death for the people, in the sense that when someone passes away, you don't get up in public and you announce the person's death. In Jahiliyyah, they used to do that. Someone who died of status, they would get up and they would announce for the death, and the people who no one knows, they don't say anything. So some of the scholars say, is it halal now for us to call people to janazah? Or is that from the prohibition? They say, no, it's permissible, because you call for them to the salah. You're not going and doing, how to kafar, do in the back of the newspaper, obituary, right? They call it that. You write all the good words about them, and only if you're famous, right? You're a skin guy, no one cares, if you died, subhanAllah. So it's a dhulm, that was Jahiliyyah. Someone, big guy died, someone else died, nobody cares. So the Sharia, you're not supposed to do that. But janazah, if you send text message, Lajjah to Da'im, said this is permissible, because you called them for the janazah, and there's no wasila illa bidhalik. Today, people, they don't know who's died, where it is. So if you say, brothers, in janazah today, it's allowed. But you don't say, okay, today someone died, and so died, and you're making only mention of specific people. And some scholars say the exemption will be someone like the ulama, or someone who's a very big figure in Islam. Because of that person, we have huquq, we want to know if they died or not, because of the impact they have. But I'm just talking about how today, if people have status, they get the announcement, right? Like you see in the news, right? So, with our phones, this guy died. Okay, someone else died too. How come that guy's only mentioned? So like this. But that's not to do with janazah. Janazah, you have to, if you want to tell people, this is good. The Shaykh now, he finishes the chapter by talking about the next thing, when the issue 673, وَالْبُكَاءُ عَلَيْهِ غَيْرُ مَكْرُوهٍ إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ مَعَهُ نَدْبٌ وَلَا نِيَاحَةٌ. So he says, it is not disliked to cry for the deceased if there is no nadb, which is to cry and to say good words about the deceased out of pain and sorrow. So nadb is to cry for them, while saying things about them, like, oh, he was the best one, we look at how do we lose him, those kind of things. You're saying all of these good things about him in a manner which is not praising them. You're saying that out of unfortunate, you're feeling like the loss was too much. That's not allowed. So only crying because of rahmah, not saying good words of upsetness and sorrow with it, and nor wailing, which is shouting and hitting the self and ripping the clothes. So the scholars say crying is allowed. Nabi doesn't cry when his son Ibrahim died. And that's warned. In the ayn tadma, the eye, it sheds tears. The heart is sad. Muslims, we have heart, we cry. But do not crying and saying, why did he pass? He was the best. But how about dhikr mahasin? You can mention the good about the person, but like I said, not in the angle of, not in the way of ta'assuf, you're sad the person passed away. You understand death is real. But the scholars, they write books about people who passed away, or someone you know, your family member, you want to talk about the good they had, or for example, someone gives ta'aziyah to you, condolences, and they say your father was a good man. There's nothing wrong with that. But when a person who's crying and he's saying that, when he's saying the words, he's saying it because he's upset with what happened. He's not saying it as the haqq, he's saying it out of upset. He's bothered by the death in the way that's not correct. You should have patience. That's why you're never supposed to encourage people to go beyond the hudud. The last two the Shaykh mentions, or last song, we'll finish. وَلَا بَأْسْ بِزِيَارَةِ الْقُبُورِ لِلرِّجَالِ وَيَقُولُ إِذَا مَرَّ بِهَا أَوْ زَارَهَا. So the next one the Shaykh says, issue 674, there's no problem in visiting the graves لِلرِّجَالِ. And we know he's still لِلرِّجَالِ because the khilaf ulama, so the women visit the graves. We don't have time, but the correct opinion, women can visit graves. With the condition that when they visit the graves, they don't also go to excess. There's no wailing, they're not saying anything bad. Okay, so women are allowed to visit the graves, قول الصحيح من أهل العلم, because Aisha, she visited her brother Abdul Rahman when he passed away. In Mecca, she visited him. And also Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Hadith Bukhari, when he passed by the woman in the grave, he said, be patient, and she said, leave me alone. And Nabi Sallallahu later on, when she found Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, she apologized. Ibn Hajar says, Ibn Hajar, that she was sitting at the grave, Nabi Sallallahu didn't prohibit her. He didn't say to get out of here, move. So what's the prohibition about women visiting the grave? Zuwarat, too much visiting. Excessive visiting is not liked for women because they fear that too much it may lead them to be overcome with emotion. So if they're going to visit the graves for remembering the akhirah, and for the men it's recommended. And then the scholars say, what should you say? The Shaykh says you should say when you go to the grave, the dua, this is a Muslim grave, you visit Muslims, Salamun alaykum ahl diyari qawmin mu'mineen wa inna insha'Allahu bikum lahiqun Allahumma la tahrimna ajruhum wa la taftinna ba'duhum waghfir lana wa lahum nasallallahu lana wa lakum afiyah. So again, there's some ziyadat, but that part there, this hadith has been reported in general authentic. So that's when you go to visit the Muslim grave. Okay, so if you go to a grave, you're non-Muslims, you wouldn't say this dua, but can you visit a non-Muslim grave? Yes. For what reason? Tadhkirah. They get a reminder of the akhirah. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam prohibit you from the graves. فَزُورُوهَا, visit them. تَذَكِّرُكُمْ الْآخِرَةِ. It's going to remind you of the akhirah. Today, this is one of the best ways to get yourself in check. Just go to the grave. You see many people, they failed. Many people, they passed. You see a Muslim grave, non-Muslim grave. You reflect. There's one group like this, one like this. It makes you think. Lastly, the Shaykh says, issue 676, which is 675, sorry. So 675 was actually the dua, sorry. The dua was 675. 676, the last one. وأي قربة فعلها وجعل ثوابها لميت مسلم نفعه ذلك. Now he says, any good you did for the deceased, to give them to a Muslim deceased, then it will benefit them. And we studied this in the Friday class. إهداء الثواب للميت. What's the hukm of giving the thawab to the deceased? So here he says, أي قربة. Because he believes, the Shaykh takes the view that it's an open door. That which is reported and that which is qiyas. But the correct opinion, we said that the ulama, they divided it into categories. That which is from the ibadat maliyah, that which is ibadat badaniyah, that which is ibadat maliyah wal badaniyah. The idea is the khilaf is on a'mal badaniyah. Can I do, for example, sadaqah? Yes, everyone agrees. Can I do hajj? Yes, it's reported. Can I do salah for them? No, that's not allowed. Can I do, for example, build a well? Yes, that's from the maliyah, you can. Can I give mushaf for them? Yes. Can I read Quran? Differed. Like this. So here the Shaykh talks about it. We talked a little bit before, but the best is to follow the sunnah. Whatever is reported, do it. Whatever is not reported, avoid it, in order to make sure that the deceased gets the reward. That's the end of the, inshallah, at least the first book and end of this chapter, Kitab Janaiz. Next time, inshallah, there will be no class next week. In the week after that, inshallah, we will go from Kitab al-Zakat, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And who has any 1-2 questions, very short, yes? So the fetus that died has a soul. The scholars decided they look into how old was it when it passed away. So they look at it, was it before the soul was blown into it? Then yes. If the soul wasn't, like it didn't have its body parts, the features, so they look at the age. For example, 120, the soul is there. But some say also you take a look at whether or not the features were present. So they say 81 days for sure the body of the deceased, the features are present after during 81 days or more. But even then the khilaf, because of the Prophet's son Ibrahim passed away, they didn't pray for him. At least Anas Malik said, I don't know if they did. So here the scholars, they say if you can, but you don't have to. And that seems to be a good way to make jama'ah, because if Anas is saying we don't know, and Anas is always there. Shaykh Albani brings this, so you can look into that to see more Shaykh. He's talking praying. He said, I don't. Washing, same thing, goes back to this. If you're allowed to pray, you can wash. So go like that. Yes?
Chef, 3 questions, if you don't mind.
Okay. Okay.
For the Salatul Janazah, if you come late, let's say you came for the third or second takbir, what do you say? Do you at that point say the Fatiha in the same order you come?
Yes. So correct, when you come late, you follow the order you're supposed to follow. So for he's doing second, you Fatiha first, like that. Then you continue, because you're gonna do like regular salah. When you come late to salah, they're in the second rak'ah, you're in the first rak'ah. You just normally. So if they move the body away, you still finish as normal. You just keep doing 2 takbir and you finish whatever you miss.
And for the graveyard, let's say family member that died in a different place, different country, and you visited another time, like basically, let's say months down the road. Can you, with another person that you both missed, can you do jama'ah together, or each will pray separate?
So yes, if you're going to pray on a body that's already been prayed on, we said the best not to, but it's allowed. But if you go to, for example, the land and someone you know passed away there, can you pray for them? You can. Jama'ah is allowed, because Jama'ah is the asl of Salat al-Janazah. But remember, if we're going to visit them, we don't make the ziyarah, suffer for the ziyarah. But let's say we came to the country, then they're there, then we can go and pray. And also the thing is that if they prayed on already, the best is to visit them and make dua. That's the best, because if someone already prayed on them, like let's say everyone prayed on them, you didn't, but then you visit the country, your relatives there, you want to visit them just to make dua for them, that's fine. But if let's say someone did want to pray, then jama'ah is allowed, because that's the asr for the janazah. And the last one? So that's one, there's some issue. Women praying in the graveyard or women visiting the grave. So we said that some scholars say not allowed during the visit, then everything else is, and some say allowed, but then the question now is, how about praying and how about the burial? So maybe inshallah the next time we come we'll explain the difference, because it is a different, there's a bit different. Barakallahu feekum, subhanakallah, bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.